Okay, welcome to the Committee of the Whole meeting of the Cape Coral City Council. Today is February 25th, 2026. This meeting now comes to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam City Clerk, please call the roll.
Mayor Gunter.
Here.
Council members Donnell.
Here.
Kaduke.
Here.
Torre.
Here.
Lastra.
Here.
Lehman. Here. Long.
Here.
Steinke.
Here.
All present.
Okay, thank you. Item 4 is business. And 4A is discussions. Today, the first discussion under A1 is the term sheet discussion for Jaycee Park. And I will turn it over to the city manager to start with.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to have Mark Mason, Assistant City Manager, do this presentation.
Morning, Mayor, council members. Mark Mason, Assistant City Manager. As soon as this thing flips over, there we go. So a little background, as the City Council recall, on December 10th, we came to the City Council, discussed 3 options for the final build out of the concessionaire building at Jaycee Park. And from that, the City Council chose option 2 to build a shell building and to go out for an RFP for a new concessionaire to operate that facility at Jaycee Park. So on December 12th, the city issued the RFP for the management and operation of the concession area in the food truck court at Jaycee Park. Solicitation closed on January 13th. The documentations were downloaded by 11 reviewers. 4 engaged with select areas of the solicitation, but did not progress to a submission. And so we received 1 proposal from the Kearns Restaurant Group. And from that receipt, it was evaluated and deemed responsive and compliant with the procurement procedures. The city negotiating team met internally on January 21 to review the proposal, and then we had subsequent meetings with Zach Kearns from the Kearns Restaurant Group on January 28th and February 4th regarding the development of a term sheet. And following those meetings, the term sheet I'm going to go through here, the highlights of the term sheet was drafted and in preparation of developing a concessionaire agreement. So as a reminder what the Jaycee Park looks like and where the concessionaire's lease area in the wet zone would be. It's in the southern southeast corner of Jaycee Park. It's in the pink area. And so in this case, the term sheet calls for the parties, in this case, the Kearns Group, if they are awarded this and enter into a concessionaire agreement, will create a newly formed LLC in order to operate this, and it will be controlled by the Kearns Restaurant Holdings LLC. The subject premises remain the same as previously identified with the concession area, also known as the wet zone restriction area. And the wet zone restriction area is within that pink area that you saw, and the rest of the park is basically dry. Agreement type is a concessionaire agreement that will grant exclusive rights to manage and operate the Jaycee Park concession area and the food truck court. The term of agreement is 20 years with an option to renew for 10 years for a total of 30 years. Completion of build out, the concessionaire will be responsible for the build out of the building shell to include all the furnishings and concession operations equipment, anything in order to operate the facility. The hours of operation will be determined by the concessionaire with the understanding that there will be no operations between 9 p.m. and 8 a.m., excepting any of the usual closing and cleaning process for the building after they close at 9 o'clock. The extended hours may be requested for any specific holidays, city special events, or concessionary events. Those requests would be made to city management. Repairs and maintenance, the responsibility for the building and the site would be with the concessionaire. And they must keep it, and maintain in exceptional condition, make immediate repairs after notice from the city if we notice anything. All facets of the food truck court operations will be managed by the concessionaire, and the concessionaire will be responsible for the cost of any utilities, taxes, assessments associated with the concessionary and the food court. The concession fees, we're looking at an initial payment of $1,064,876. This is the same amount that we brought to the city council, and it's cost of the build out of the building, the bistro building area. This will be plus interest paid over 240 equal monthly installments. We've put in $4,437 plus whatever the interest cost up to not to exceed 5%. And so at this point, if it was level debt service, it'd be a little over $7,000 a month, $84,000 a year for 20 years. Minimum guarantee, $75,000 per year, $6,250 per month. Also a percent of total gross proceeds, 4% in years 1 through 10, 5% in years 11 through 20, and 5.5% during any renewal term. In addition, the Kearns Group has offered a financial partnership in the construction of the boat slips. The concessionaire's commitment would be to provide any and all construction services associated with the 24 boat slips with a maximum length of 40 feet. Their estimated cost commitment to do this is a maximum of $1.3 million. Credit to minimum guarantee, we would credit the minimum guarantee for the term for however long it takes to recover the $1.3 million, which is about 18 years. And that's the nuts and bolts of the term sheet. And we're here for any questions you have.
Councilmember Kilrain.
Yeah, Mark, you mentioned 84,000 would be the equivalent debt service. I think you just mentioned
$84,000 a year.
Okay. First of all, let me just say that I think that the Kearns are great operators, and I think that they could do a great job here. I got some concerns about the economics of the agreement as it's now structured. First of all, if you look at the manner in which the initial payment is going through, that $1 million, $1,065,000, basically, if you look at a net present value at a return discount rate of 10%, that's $506,000. It's equivalent of $506,000 paid up front. So it's not equivalent to what the last deal was. And I guess I'm comparing this with what the last deal was as compared to just something coming off of a new agreement with nothing out there. Also, the construction on the second piece with the boat slips, Mark, thank you for your estimate of 1.8 to 2.3 million, but we're repatriating that money back. So I guess for a period of time of 20 years plus 10 renewal, 30 years is it's a sweet deal, a very sweet deal. And I appreciate the opportunity to have Kearns, but I just don't see that the city is being aggressive enough in what we expect to be paid for such a location and such an opportunity. So based on that, there are my concerns. I would look to structure that initial payment in a different manner and get you to have a little bit more skin in the game. That's where I'm at on it. So thank you, Mayor. I just want to make those comments up front, but I'm open to listen.
Thank you. Mr. City Attorney.
Thank you, Mayor. In reviewing I guess these are the material terms of the proposed operation for the Jaycee Park concessionaire. At this point in time, it would be my legal recommendation that they should be rejected. When you factor in the initial payment, it is not really an initial payment. It is spread out over 240 months. When you factor in the minimum guarantee based upon this going back essentially paying for the docks. That's providing them the place there. We can spend our money however we want. We don't have to write it in within the concessionaire agreement. Docks. There's other provisions as well having to do with allowing its assignment to happen. There's also other provisions that are not favorable to the city in regards to what it is that has been proposed. And at this point in time, I would be remiss to say to you that this is not the favorable deal that the city should proceed forward with. The 20-year initial term is really 30 years when you factor in that it's an automatic renewal, but for their being not in default. I don't see how it is that we can enter into a long-term relationship. And I view that in the sense of what we did for the boathouse, which was essentially a 20-year agreement, and what changed over the initial 20-year or the 10-year term. And for this, the initial term is 20 years. I couldn't even conceive of the material changes in how the city operates in 10 years from now. And to lock ourselves into this, I believe is a disadvantage to the city and does a disservice, especially without at least a minimum of a termination for convenience upon a certain period of time. There's no reopener of the 4% for the cost sharing. That is a commitment of 10 years. That is less than what they ultimately agreed to in their other agreement with the city for the boathouse. So based on the circumstances here, I would be concerned that we would be proceeding forward with this concessionaire operator under these material terms at our own peril, and I would recommend its rejection.
Thank you. Councilmember Kadut?
Thank you, Mayor. I completely disagree with you, Alex. You make a lot of money, and the alternative is we eat the cost. We're here because a prior council decided to do this, and now we're going to take on debt for that. I completely disagree. Thank you.
Councilmember Steinke?
Thank you, Mayor. I don't agree with rejection. In my opinion, we're almost there. I wasn't at the negotiating table. I'm not a fan of termination of convenience, not when someone's putting money into the deal, effort into the deal for the rug to be pulled out from under them. We had another issue, same thing. I disagree with termination of convenience. But I do believe that the 30-year term is too long. And so I would feel better if it was a 10-year term with 2 10-year renewals with the agreement of both parties. That would then allow for any changes at the city, in the city's circumstances at the end of that 10-year period, the Kearns Restaurant Group at the end of that 10-year period, if some modifications needed to be made, they could be made, and we'd be good for another 10 years. So I could see where a 10 plus 10 plus 10 would be a better way to go. I have a little bit of a concern as it relates to the condition with which the property needs to be maintained. If we're turning that over to another entity other than the city to maintain, exceptional condition is extremely subjective. And we can find ourselves in a position of, well, I think it's exceptional. Well, we don't think it's, and so then what do you do? And so I think there just needs to be a little bit more definition around how the maintenance of the property needs to be maintained and to what level, if in fact the city's not going to be responsible for it. The initial payment, I totally agree. An initial payment isn't an initial payment unless the payment's made. So it's not an initial payment. It would be a contribution over 20 years. The initial payment, if it were made by writing the city a check, it would mean that either the investors, in this case the Kearns Restaurant Group, would stroke the check out of their own bank accounts or their own financial reserves. They have other businesses, other places and whatnot. So it's either their investment in the deal and skin they bring to the game, or they go to another financing institution to acquire the $1,064,000 to provide that initial payment. That's when it becomes an initial payment. Otherwise, the terms that it is right now, we've just determined that we're willing to be that bank. And I'm not so much in favor of that. I would like to see that skin in the game up front. Not totally opposed to it, but obviously, this decision's up to 8 people, but that's just my input. An initial payment isn't an initial payment unless it's made. I believe the minimum guarantee and then the percentage of gross receipts on top of that minimum over that period of time, I think that's fair. I'm not totally bought in with the thought that the partnership in the boat slips, if in fact the 1.3 million, if I'm not understanding this correctly, just help me. If in fact they pay 1.3 million towards that, and then we credit that back to them against the minimum guarantee, they really haven't paid it. They provided the front money, and then we gave them their money back. So that's not a contribution. That's just we use their money instead of us going to commercial paper or whatever we have to do to get it. So that's not a contribution. That's a fronting of to be repaid later. So how that's worded and what that's perceived to be in the agreement, I believe is a little bit of smoke and mirror. So if that's being done as kind of like a payback for allowing them to not bring the $1 million to the table up front, I don't buy that. And the other is that there is no guarantee right now that DEP, Army Corps of Engineers, and a future council will allow that boat slip to happen. I'm totally in favor of it. I believe it should be there. I think it's in the city's best interest. It's in our families with smaller boats. It's in their best interest for it to be there. So I would be hopeful that this council and future councils will continue down the quest of making that happen. But for that to be a leverage point in this agreement to kind of offset what was done to begin with in not having to make an initial payment, I don't buy that. And that's where I stand on it.
Thank you. Councilmember Lehman.
Yeah, I agree in large part with Councilmember Stanky. When originally we had the reef involved, they had to come up with earnest money of 1.3 million. They did not, hence they are not part of this anymore. And now we're making exceptions for the Kearns Group. We're going to let them pay the upfront money in 240 equal monthly installments? Nah, I don't think so. And not only that, the credit for the minimum guarantee with building the boat slips, you basically, we might as well do it ourselves. I mean, that's ridiculous. That we're going to give them the money back? I don't think so. I don't agree with this at all. Thank you.
Councilmember Long.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I guess you got to look at it into perspective. And so I've already heard twice up here about comparing it to the last deal, but there is no last deal. And so you've got to think how that is or how that became. So it's the last deal and not the current deal because it wasn't feasible. So we're not making an exception. We're learning from a mistake, so to speak, that didn't work out. And it didn't work out because the market, for one reason or another, didn't allow it to work out. So yeah, I don't necessarily agree with stretching it out over the time that we have it stretched out. But I think to characterize it as making an exception for a particular group, I think to give staff more grace than that is to say that they're actually trying to be feasible with working around a situation that they found themselves in earlier that wouldn't work. I don't want to get in the weeds about some of what I would deem the smaller stuff. Certainly, Councilmember Steinke, I think a large majority of us agreed in part to your termination for convenience. I think that's sort of at the end of the list of the things that we need to talk about here. If we want to waste any more of our resources or staff resources pushing this thing along, what we should talk about, and I think I've already started, it's the money. right? It's always the money. So let's talk about the terms, the actual terms that we care about. I don't like it. I don't want to do it. I disagree. To Councilwoman Kaduk's point is the alternative is no money. So any money is better than no money, but yes, certainly you don't want to roll over either. This is the only girl at the dance. So I would certainly like to just, instead of say, I don't like it, come up with an alternative. Councilman Sykes said he wasn't at the negotiating table. Well, this is realistically the negotiating table. So let's negotiate. So for me, I think he laid down some good points. 30 years, hell of a long time. Maybe shorten that a little bit. I think I agree with the initial payment part. Even if we split the baby or worked it down a little bit better so that we had a little bit of that nut up front. I don't want to play bank either if we don't have to, but also understand that requiring the whole nut up front is in large part the reason that the last deal fell through. So Councilwoman Laster's point, we got to compromise. And so I think certainly the other issue that Councilman Psyche brought up, I agree with. We're basically just shifting around the money at the point where we say, oh, well, they're helping us out with the boat slips, but in reality, it's just crediting against what the minimum guarantee is. Minimum guarantee, since we're talking about terms, should be just that. That's the guarantee. Anything beyond that, if we're labeling it a contribution, which it should be that. And so that's where I would start, is lowering the years, maybe working on that initial payment, and then trying to figure out, as far as the boat slips are concerned, if that is a contribution, let's make it one rather than having it be absorbed under the minimum. Thank you.
I got a few other lights on, but I'm going to go to the council members who haven't spoken yet. Councilmember Laster.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councilmember Long, and thank you, Councilmember Kaduk. It is true. Sadly, whenever I see this topic and this upcoming topic, I get a lot of anxiety. And I am grateful to the Kerns for completing this RFP because you do run a great operation. And, we have many friends in common who are restaurateurs over the bridge and, who always speak highly of you. And I've visited all your restaurants over the bridge. So with that said, there's a couple of things. I agree. We need to figure out a compromise because some money is better than no money. And I believe the commitment made with the previous council was that this concessionaires agreement, or the previous one, was going to help alleviate the debt service. In this current agreement, if you look, we're really only over 20 years, 30 years, going to be alleviating about 10% of that overall debt of the 18 million. And that is a concern. But like Councilmember Long said, some money is better than no money. And, the other thing that I hate to even bring it up because I know that we've had I know you guys have too, a plethora of emails with the concern of the sale of alcohol at that park. I have never, visualized what's going to happen at this park as long as I've lived here for 18 years. I took my daughter to that park when she was little, and it was just a really sweet little neighborhood park. And, we've just got a lot of residents who have concerns, and I don't know what the answer is to that because from a business standpoint, I understand, you're not going to make your money back without the sale of alcohol. But I'm just wondering if there's a compromise we could look at or somehow talk about that didn't include that. And I don't know the answer to that. Other than my own thoughts and from speaking to, hundreds of residents around that park, that is a big concern. And I know that we're looking to the future, and I know that we have to think about, the long game, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, because right now the majority of people that live around that park are retirees. And so that is the difficult challenge, sitting in this chair, is how do we compromise and make the current residents happy, and then of course the younger families and the future residents. As Councilmember Steinke said, that's a great idea to be able to have those floating docks there, to be able to have younger families who can't afford the big boats, to go out into the Gulf or to go out, over and let's say to Cayo Costa or Sanibel, but have a nice little park for them to enjoy with their families. So, for me, I really think we need to come up with a compromise. I would like to see if we as a council could, think of another way without the sale of alcohol, and I don't know if that's possible. But again, really, we're only getting rid of 10%, if that, of the total debt service. So there's got to be some other opportunities, because I know we committed that to the residents, not us particularly, but I know when this was voted in 2024, before some of us were up here, that was something that was committed to the residents. So I'd like to see how we can compromise and have an agreement that maybe reaches all of that. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, Councilmember Kilrain?
Yeah, just a couple, Mr. Mason, the operating cost for the park, X, the bistro and the food trucks, have any idea what that'd be on an annual basis?
I'm sorry, I didn't
Just the
hear that.
maintenance cost of the park itself. Do we have any projections on what that might be?
No, I don't.
That's another thing we have to keep in consideration. When I mentioned net present value, I was looking at the city really equivalent investment at 10%. The comparison of what this agreement is as compared to the last agreement and the inability for them to bring forth that capital had a lot to do, I think, with their resource base and their risk profile. I think that this park is now constructed. A couple of things we heard last time was that they were uncertain as to whether or not we complete the agreement the way it was. I think that lingered in the background of their indecision to be able to come forward with the money. So I think that the risk barrier is greatly reduced at this point in time for anyone wanting to go in and operate here. So I think that's why I think that this deal could be a very lucrative deal. And basically, there's not a whole lot of risk. So that discount rate I applied was based on us looking at putting the money in ourselves and thinking we could get a good deal out of another place. And that's the hurdle rate that we would kind of look for an exclusive condition on the park, which is a 30-year lease and whatever you'd get. So I'm all in favor of looking at maybe trying to shorten down the terms of the lease. I'm more so in favor of now looking at your investment from this. And I don't think your hurdle rate is going to be a 10% discount rate. I think you'd be a lot more comfortable with a lower discount rate, which means your initial investment could be raised above that $506,000. That would be the 10% discount rate. Okay, so the net present value, whatever you put in there, would be more at lower risk. And so it'd be a better opportunity for you coming from your side. I know restaurant ventures can be crazy risky all over the place. And I've been there, done that, and got killed a couple of times, and I've had some good experiences a couple of times. But the point being is, I really think we need more money up front, and that's where it's at. I really think that if we can shorten out the term of agreement and have some clean-cut distinction, and I'm okay with 10 years up front. But I just think right now the way it's structured, it's just much too lucrative. And the city's not going to get great benefit out of it. A 30-year long term is too long. And I think that the opportunity there, the risk is really reduced as to where we're at right now. I think that the $75,000 per year guarantee will be helpful to us, but I think we need to get a little bit more than that. So I'm okay with the percentages too, but I would like it structured a little bit different way. So thank you, Mayor.
Mr. City Manager.
I just wanted to provide some information on the dock portion of this. So taking you back to the Parks and Rec Master Plan, one of the two biggest things that our residents wanted was waterfront activation and a beach. So part of the yacht club portion was to expand the beach, but everywhere else in all the other parks, we've been trying to activate the waterfront. So that was the whole reason for the docks. The dock portion of this that's presented to you is not really something that is a make or break material term, right? This is something that if we take it away, the bones of the deal are still there. The dock discussion was generated around if the city takes in the revenue, then it competes with all the other priorities that the city has. So the idea around here was, and on top of that, there's implicit cost savings. If we bring in that cost and don't do an offset, it comes into the general fund and now competes with all the other expenses that everybody wants to use it for. This was a way of taking revenue that is generated at the park and then reinvesting it in the park to accomplish the Parks and Rec master plan goal, which is waterfront activation. And on top of that, we don't have the markup, because for us to do it, we're going to hire a construction firm, we're going to hire a management firm. It's going to be more than the 1.3. So the idea here was just take the money out of what would otherwise be coming to you off the top as a credit in order to accomplish it. And that saves us and the taxpayers having another contractor and another management firm handle that contract. So I think I hear, everybody saying, oh, the docks aren't really a credit towards that. It wasn't really ever intended to be that. It was intended to be an administrative mechanism to get it done with revenues that are already being generated there. If you take that out, we bring the revenue in, there's no credit on the monthly payment, and then we figure out what we want to do with it at a later date. That's all. Thank you.
Councilmember Donnell.
Yeah. I would just say that, excuse me, and hearing everyone, thank you for the input, that it's quite the conundrum, and there's just no easy way out of it. But if we keep focused with the money part of it, the debt part of it, because either way, whatever we do up here, if we keep that as a focus, that's why I would like to see this reworked. We only have one person, and thank you for bringing it forward. And I think that we can work through some of the items that have been brought forward to kind of keep pushing, because on the other end of this, it sits in our lap in totality. So I would like to see us continue. There's just no way out of it. And that's right. There's no way out. I'm not talking about the alcohol and the food trucks, but the bottom line, folks, just don't pitter paddle around it. The alcohol is what makes, I'm not a businessman or anything like that, but I've heard it. So, but it's just put it on the table, come here and give it your thoughts, and we just have to move forward with it. So I'm looking forward to working with it, moving forward, but get a better deal. So I will not be voting for this in this draft, but I would like to continue, because we need to do something. But keeping the focus of this debt at the forefront. Did you catch that? All right, that's all. Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah, I guess I'll jump in here real quick. First of all, for me, when you look at the upfront monies that we have talked about with other agreements, and I agree with Councilmember Long, that agreement's long gone, so it's really not on the table. It's not like we have option 1 and option 2 here. But we can use it for a reference, I believe. So for me, one of the things that I had asked for from staff, and I know we all received the email on Tuesday, what exactly did we have in costs for the bistro shell, the food truck pads, food truck utilities, and the grease trap? Because that's what that particular organization, whether it's the Kearns Group or whoever goes there, that's what we will be given them. And the cost of that was $1,310,194.67. I'm not really sure where they come up with the $1,064,000 that they got in the term sheet, but for me, if that's what we build and that's the infrastructure that we had to put in place for that building, that's the monies that I want to see brought back, not the $1,064,000. I'm guessing that's probably why we were close to the 1.4 million before, because that's about what we have. So for me, the $1,064,000, I can't support that amount. And then when you look through the term agreement, as far as the percentages, I think it should equal exactly what the boathouse agreement is and what those percentages are. The other thing I agree with my colleagues, I think the 20-year with the automatic 10-year is too long. I have no problem with a 10, 10, and 10. But I do believe within, it shouldn't be an automatic. It has to be agreed upon by both parties. That gives us an out if we need it. But just to have an automatic renewal, to me, why have that? If you're going to have an automatic renewal, just call it what you're going to call it. It's either a 20 or a 30-year agreement. So to me, it should be a 10-year, 10-year, and 10-year agreement, as long as it's agreed upon by both parties. The other problem that I haven't seen in here, if we're going to do some type of a structure like that, I know it looks like we have to make sure that our percentages that we get in sales, maybe for each one of those 10 years, changes. I think they have that kind of structured that way. The 1,310,194, I think that should be paid up front. That shouldn't be over a 240-month period. The other question, the docks, and I'm sure the reason they want the docks, you're going to have more people coming there. So what that's going to do is drive their revenue up, and then in return, that's going to give us more of a revenue share as far. So I'm sure that's why they want to buy into that program, because they know that's going to increase their sales. And again, I think I support the docks. I think the water access is important. I mean, if you look back at our ULI, analysis on the city, waterfront access was one of the key things that they felt that we were deficient in. So I think that's important that we recognize that and try to have that voter access. We're known as a voter paradise, but our access is fairly limited. So I think anytime that we can expand upon that, we can. I think what we have to ask ourselves here today, are we here to try to recoup monies that we spent and future monies that we may be able to obtain? And the reason that I think it's an important question to ask, I'll just give you an example. And I'm sure the Kearns Group's going to do this on day one. You got 6 food truck pads. I can tell you that Slipaways, less than a mile away, charges $6,000 a month per pad. We have 6 pads there. Say we rent those pads out for $4,000, $2,000 less a month than they are down the street. You got 6 pads, that's $24,000 a month rent. You do absolutely nothing except take that rent payment every month. If you do only 4 pads, because I think originally we talked about maybe having 4 consistently and the other 2 for special events. If you did 4 pads at $4,000, that's $16,000. So just that in itself, before you even talk about the building, generates more money possibly than what we're going to bring in. So I think we have to take that into consideration when we are, looking at this, because there's no doubt no matter who goes there, they're going to do that on day one to bring those food trucks in. Do we want to be a landlord or, that's a question that we have to ask ourselves. And then you still have the building itself that you could rent out. To me, as a businessman, looking at it, I really believe that we would be better to rent the pads out ourselves and then rent the building out. We're going to generate more revenue that way, in my opinion. So if this was my property, that's exactly what I would do. I would separate the 2. People may not, be interested in, and I know our RFP didn't state that, but I think if you separate the 2, the utilities is there, and I think even if you take a little less money with the upfront money, and maybe just look at the $1,064,000, that's what the bistro shell cost, without the food truck pads, the utilities, and the grease traps. Then that's when you take that $1,064,000. Here's your building. good luck with your business. And then we lease out the food truck pads. To me, that's a better business sense. You're going to make more money. So I just wanted to put that out there as an option. But as far as the way that the term sheet now is structured, I couldn't support it for the variety of reasons that I've mentioned. My other question, Mr. City Attorney, were you involved in this concessionaire agreement?
Initially, I was, and then the document was modified by the proposer's attorney. So because he's represented by an attorney, I'm unable to then be a part of that because the attorney was not there. So it was done by staff.
Well, I would recommend, wouldn't it be a fair statement to characterize this as a legal document?
Well, it would be legal terms of a base by way of which we would have a contractual agreement. You are correct. Those are material terms that would, if you all agree to it, I would then move forward and memorializing that and make an actual agreement that would be binding upon the city and the proposer.
So I really don't understand why you weren't part of the process. To me, if they are represented by an attorney, then any meetings, their attorney would have to be present so you could be there.
That would be the only way, but
Right.
There's no legal prohibition of client talking to client. And that's what occurred.
Right.
So I was involved at the onset and to further kind of identify what the city manager said. And I know that Councilmember Long was kind of raising his head in regards to the contribution towards phase 2. I had initially extended that they would contribute up to $1 million towards the cost of the construction of phase 2 for the boat. There was no intimation or representation that the minimum guarantee or anything else that the city would be receiving would be applied towards that $1 million contribution. That was a mechanism by way of which that I understand would be, as Councilmember Kaduk said, we'd be getting essentially more money to complete the full project, but it now then morphed into this. That's something where I said legally, I don't recommend that term. And I found out about this, I think, yesterday evening. I know that it was floated before, but there was no commitment to it. So when I originally conveyed it to them, I said, I expressed that I will have no problem speaking to the council and conveying that you are inclined to complete phase 2, but you must pay $1 million towards that completion at that cost. That's where I left it at.
Yeah, and I would agree. I mean, if they're going to contribute for the docks, I think that's an upfront cost that they incur, just like it's an upfront cost, for the building and the other infrastructures. But moving forward, if we're going to go down this path, I think it's important that the city attorney's office is present and involved in the agreement. I could tell you several examples of where the city attorney's office comes in after the fact, and usually it's a problem. So why you weren't involved through the whole process is beyond me. But I think moving forward, we have to make sure that you're a part of the process, because it's a little unsettling for me when staff is bringing a proposal to us and then sitting right next to the city manager as a city attorney that doesn't agree with what's being provided. So to me, I don't think we need to find ourselves in those predicaments. And if we work together moving forward, I don't think we will find ourselves in those predicaments. That's all I have. I see a lot of other lights on. Councilmember Donnell. I'm sorry? You're good? Councilmember Kaduk?
Thank you, Mayor. And yes, I completely agree with you. And I am taken back that Alex wasn't involved with this. However, it's only worth what someone is willing to pay. And right now we have one person that stepped up that's willing to pay. Or is it the taxpayers that we know marched in here that didn't want this? For me personally, I don't want to take on the debt. And if someone's going to offset that, even if it's by 10%, 20%, it's better than nothing. So we're in a committee of the whole meeting. We're not in a voting meeting. Let's hash it out. What's the problems? Let's get down to it. Thank you.
Councilmember Steinke?
Thank you, Mayor. Let me just preface my remarks with, I'd like to see the Kearns Group do this. I just want it to be a win-win. To the mayor's point about the revenue generated from contributions from the food trucks, it's a lucrative deal. If we had to put an RFP out that says, we'd like to know who would like to be interested, that would bring no money to the deal and start doing business at the park and taking rent from food trucks, I think we'd have 15 proposals in front of us. That's not the RFP that went out. And so the terms that have come back this way, if the RFP had been presented with these types of acceptable terms being willing to be listened to, I think there are probably a number of people in our city that would come back and said, well, I'll come in and I'll run the restaurant. If I don't have to bring any money to the table, if I just need to bring some refrigeration and a liquor license, I'll consider me. But instead, we want this to be, if you will, a combined effort between an entity and us, which means that both parties bring something to the table. We bring a fabulous park, we bring a fabulous waterfront, and we've built a fabulous concession stand, if you will, and a great food truck environment with utility service to each one of those pads. It's not like this food truck pulls up somewhere and hopes to do business. They're at a place where there is going to be traffic. There is going to be a place for them to do business that has proper utilities for them to do business. There will be applications out the yin yang. There were over 1,000 applications at Slipaway to put food trucks there. So there will be a lot of applications from food trucks to be there. So that part of this operation is kind of a no-brainer. I agree with Councilmember Kaduk. Why can't we just kind of nail it down here and say, here's what we believe would be fair. If we don't believe this would be fair, what would be? If it's the 1.3 million, fine. Because of cost for cost. I too would like to know where the $1,064,876 came from, versus the actual cost of the production of the facility. But if the production of the facility is what we want, and we're going to meet halfway, okay, half down, and we finance the rest of it. Some skin in the game up front to come in, I think is fair. If we want to be a bank, that's up to us. And I also agree with my other council members that something's better than nothing. I'd like to see that park open and operating and serving our citizens and our visitors ASAP. And so it looks like we're going to be ready come April. It'd be great to have people there operating as close to that as possible. So I'm in agreement to let's just hammer it out. So, thanks.
Councilmember Kilray?
Yeah, my comments were very parallel to what Councilmember Steinke had just said. I'd love to see the Kearns in there. I think you guys do a great job, and I said that earlier. The matter of fact, what I would probably think about doing, maybe not even use somebody else's food trucks. If you have the boathouse, run a commissary out of there, prepackaged, and you got what, 4 miles up to Jaycee Park. If it's that far, it's probably 2 or 3. And I've done that with restaurants. You base load one to take care of 2 others. You reduce a lot of the back of the house stuff. So I think that it is one heck of an opportunity, one heck of a vantage point for you. I think your risk of running this operation is low, especially if we put in the opportunity to run the food trucks. That's a no-brainer because will be a lot of takers on that. But again, I would like to be able to see that more skin in the game up front, just as everyone else said. And just as a basis of comparison, if the 1.3, whatever the number was, 1.364 was going to be the cost that we felt was necessary to build out that portion of the food track pads and the other, that's what I would like to see at least recouped up front. I'm all for shortening the terms. We'll do a 10-year basis. That's fine with me. And let's just make sure that the contributions are parallel to what we're looking at with the boathouse. So I think that's parallel to what the mayor just said. So again, it's a little, I think it can be a win-win. We're just not quite there right now. And I realize that you guys are the only bidders, but we're in a position right now where we could probably recover an awful lot of income and revenue out of this, just being in a position to operate the food trucks ourselves. I don't think the city does a good job of that. I don't think we're going to do a good job in building anything out either. The boat docks and everything else could be done in a less encumbered manner than what the city would take to do it itself. And we already had initial design engineering done on the docks to identify, because they are in a tidal area that flows pretty rapidly. We have ways of constructing those docks. So a lot of that design engineering was done up front. So that's a big burden out of the way. Again, that's a second step. But the first step, I think, is really reduced in risk for you. And, to be able to come up with a little bit more upfront money on this thing, I think that would sweeten the deal a great deal and be open to just structuring it just a little bit differently. I'd like to make sure that we're getting some, I think it's too sweet a deal right now. And that's the easiest way of saying it. It's a bad deal for the city right now, and I'd like to see it sweetened a little bit coming toward us. Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah, if you, as Councilmember Steinke said, if you had 1,000 applicants at Slipaway less than a mile away at $6,000 a month, that shows that, that's a pretty good demand, for that property. And I think this property will be just as demanding once we get the boat slips in. Maybe not at first. But if you look at $6,000 a month for the pads, that's $24,000. $6,000 a month for 6, that's $36,000. Well, if we're getting $6,250 guaranteed, that's only 17.5% of $36,000 is what we're getting. Is that a good deal? It sure is for them, not for us. So, you either look at where we rent out the pads, or if they do, that's another line item in their term sheet where we get a percentage of the actual rent that's taken in. I don't think that should be a part of the $6,250. When you look at the monies that is going to be generated, and that will help offset. If we're here to save the taxpayers money, then we have to look at this as a business and try to come up with an agreement that not only we can live with as the Kearns Group. They've been a great partner in our city over the years. And we want them to, to continue to be a partner. But I think we are looking out for our best interest, and they are looking out for their best interest. And I think there's a meeting point in between. I don't think we're even close to it. So I think we have to go back to the drawing board and ask some of these hard questions and see what they may be able to do. I understand that we only had one person that submitted. Well, when you look at the RFP, if we put some of the terms in that's in this term sheet within that RFP, we would have probably got more people. Not having to put any money up front, where you just, okay, you're committed to that, and we're basically a bank and we're going to loan you the money and you're going to pay us back. If we'd have structured RFP like that, we'd have probably had more people, so it's a little different than what we put out there. So I do think we could do much better, and we just have to work on that and have staff in the city attorney's office collectively work on something a little better, and then bring it back at another committee of the whole. Councilmember Laster.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just wondering if there's any appetite, because you're right. If we change the term sheet, I'm wondering if that 1.4 is what scared people off from applying for the RFP. So I'm wondering, I'm just thinking out loud here, what if we put it back out and change the term sheet? Is there any appetite to do that? I mean, I don't necessarily want to hurt the Kerns, but at the same time, I want to make sure that, we're being fair and reasonable. And of course, looking at our residents, and again, that, the alcohol issue, as well as the debt service. Great point about the food trucks, Mayor. Great point, because that should be in this as well. So I wonder if we changed the term sheet to take away that 1.4 million, and if it would change their proposal back to us, or if we put it back out, they change their proposal back to us, and we get additional individuals who apply for that RFP. And I hate kicking this can down the road, because believe me, like I said earlier, it gives me great anxiety to talk about this, because I just feel like this wasn't a good deal to begin with way back. But those are just my thoughts. Thank you, Mayor.
Mr. City Attorney.
Thank you, Mayor. I was just gonna, because I'm hearing what some of you are all saying regarding potentially going back out. And that's why I was just gonna bring it up to see if there's any interest by you all to do that again, based on what I'm hearing you all saying.
Councilmember Long.
Thank you. Yeah, no, so I think, and I know nobody really bit, so I don't want to spend too much time on it. I think because it's implied, and I understand where she's coming from, and certainly appreciate the fact that Councilmember Laster has brought it up on behalf of some emails that we've received from residents. But is there any desire at all for any of us to dispense of the alcohol? I mean, I can guarantee you, and I don't speak for anyone usually, but I can certainly speak for them, that if there's no alcohol, this deal's done. There's no, these things only exist to generate revenue off alcohol. And so if you go back to the beginning of this whole thing, and I had a discussion, and I was very explicit when we talked about the alcohol last time, is, well, let's talk about whether we want it or not, because if we don't, that's fine. We make decisions as a whole, but that changes my vote on whether to move forward with the park at all, because the only part that was appealing for the alcohol for me was that the revenue that was generated would buy down our costs in the park. This wasn't in the original plans for a park, wasn't in the GO bond. There's a reason. So for us to go off of that GO bond when we're still chasing that ghost and create a brand new park, new debt, and all of these things without a revenue generating source, which is the alcohol, then I wouldn't have supported it at all. So that just for that perspective, I'm out. I'm assuming that the majority of us understand that. It's not necessarily that we want the alcohol in the park, but that was sort of the basis. That's the situation we find ourselves in. Blame it on the last council or what have you. But that's the only way that this debt is depleted in any way, shape, or form, is if we maintain the original plan to have alcohol in the park. So if, speak now or forever hold your peace kind of thing, because that's, we're never, you can put it out to bid all you want, but nobody's gonna move forward without any alcohol. The 1.4 million that keeps getting discussed, I certainly understand it. I appreciate it, but I do want to remind everyone, we can't necessarily expect to, in any business, to recoup your original investment as far as costs up front. So yeah, certainly, if it's we get the 1.4 up front, we got our money back. That's fine. But in reality, if it's a 20-year lease or a 30-year lease, we're gonna make that money tenfold. So I don't want to throw away the whole deal because we're not going to be able to make that original entire nut of our costs that we put forth to build it up front. Maybe $1 million, and then the 400 we can stretch over to 20 or what have you. There's got to be ways to structure it to where we can say, oh, when we want the entire money up front. We're going to get it no matter what. I mean, this is going to be a very lucrative deal for both of the concessionaire and the city. I think if I'm not mistaken, our other deal with them at the yacht club is one of our most profitable revenue generators in the entire city. And so that's why they're here. And that's why I want them to be here. One thing that we need to keep in mind is that's kind of how we ended up in the situation now, is because we're kind of vague with our answers about what we want. We kick it to staff. They do the best that they can with the parameters that we gave them, which is very broad. They come back, we say we don't like it, go back to the table. Well, this is the table. So, we've said it before, but I haven't seen anything get kicked out. I would like to hammer down at least some parameters for us to give back to staff so that we don't waste any more time. This park is opening when? End of April. So if we give it back to them, we won't even be having this discussion again until probably April, and that's just the way it works. So especially now that we've got the attorney involved in all the meetings. But yeah, I mean, we've got to figure out what we want. We want more. Everyone says we want more, but again, I just don't want to end up in a situation where we tell them staff to come up with more. They interpret that about how anybody would, but it's pretty ambiguous. And then they come back and we say we don't like it. So if the problem is the initial payment and there's enough of us that say we want it no matter what up front, 1.4, let's at least give staff that so that they can work with that parameter. So that way they're not floating around guessing what we meant. The minimum guarantee, if that's what we want, and we want that to be separate and distinct from the boats. And I understand what the city manager was saying, and that's great, and I appreciate that. But I guess my other question would be, the way that it's structured now, the revenue that's generated from this goes to the general fund otherwise? Mm-hmm. Would it be possible to create a restricted fund that the revenue generated would then go back? I'm just asking, I don't know. I mean, to my main point, which I said was years ago, I'm only in support of this because the revenue that was generated is going to support the cost of the park, period. So I understand you're laughing, but that was my original desire.
Yeah, I'm just laughing because yes.
Well, then wouldn't that solve the problem without having to circumvent the boat slips and have them say that they pay for it, and that way we don't have to go through the general and fight for resurfacing versus boat slips at the JC? In theory, this is all high level.
Yeah, it would be a lot more than just revenue.
I know.
You'd have park maintenance expenses, the building upkeeps.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'd have to talk to finance. I mean, it seems like
I'm just asking.
We keep getting into this thing of we want to control all these revenues, and we just keep creating funds to, this was yeah.
But you're the one that said it. I mean, you said it. If the money goes in the general and not everyone's fighting for it, well, then that, to me, defeats the purpose of originally creating the revenue generator for the park to pay for the park. If you're throwing it in the pot.
That was kind of the reason I was saying as well.
So, and I understand that there's probably some limitations and a lot of administrative stuff that goes into that. I was just throwing it out there. The slips, this is my last piece here, the pads. I don't want to necessarily bastardize this thing more than it needs to be. I agree that it should be all together for a couple different reasons. One of them is for the licensing that they're going to require. They're going to need those slips to be all underneath the same roof. So that I don't know that but a way to solve that problem without just cutting that in half. Wasn't there a term in the last agreement with city attorney where we were separating the revenue that was generated from the releasing of those slips by the concessionaire that's distinct from our gross receipts on top? So I think it was, we get half of the money that they get in rental above and beyond our gross receipts.
We separated between the 4 and the 2. Because the representation made by the previous concessionaire was that they were going to own 4. And so we treated the other 2 that was not going to be controlled by them separately. And then of course, more importantly, we had a reopener regarding the percentage of gross after 2 full calendar years. And the provisions of the contract required and mandated that it would be for purposes of not lowering, but increasing.
Correct. And that's separate than, I guess, my question, but certainly notable.
Right, but they separated between the 4 and the 2.
Okay.
Originally, they were all going to be sub-concessionaires of the concessionaire, but then they expressed during the negotiations that they were going to be owners of 4, and that's how we separated it out.
I'm just trying to, the mayor, brought up a good point. I think someone else had mentioned it. There's a lot of revenue that's basically just a one line item deal rather than a service revenue where they just collect the rents. And so it would be meaningful for us to be able to receive that, but for a couple different reasons. We can't just say, hey, that's separate, and they have the bistro and we rent out the slips separately. So another way maybe would be to say that any of those slips that are not operated by the concessionaire, we receive half of the receipt of the.
And to be fair, when we did the initial public-private proposal that was brought before you all during the public hearing for approval, we as the city didn't really know how much revenue was going to be generated from this. That's why we allowed openers to exist. That's why the original contractual agreement, the initial term was for only 10 years, recognizing that, they were given 8 2-year renewals so that we can control it in the event that we found ourselves in a scenario 10 years from now where we are just not getting the amount of money that we should be getting. So there was a level of uncertainty, and I drafted the concessionaire agreement to give the city as much flexibility to address those uncertainties in future years to come. And that's as an example of a learning lesson from the boathouse and what happened. There was only one player back then, and we ultimately did an agreement that I thought was not advantageous to the city 10 years later. And so I didn't want that to be there, and that's why I expressed to you the terms right now I couldn't legally recommend, because I'd be doing you a disservice as your legal counsel.
Okay.
Hopefully I answered that for you.
No, you did. I mean, I'm to the point where I think we all should have a little bit of urgency here, rather than just saying, hey, kick it back, we're not there yet. We've got 2 months till the park opens. In a perfect world, I would love for the whole park to open. That doesn't mean that we roll over and give them what they want, but there's got to be a sense of urgency, whether we, again, define some concrete parameters here among us so that the process goes way smoother, or, we provide a deadline that we'd like to see this back that would be consistent with still staying on that timeline. But yeah, I want to keep that in perspective. Thank you.
Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to go over some items with you all that were in the RFP that went out, because I'm hearing 3 of you say that, if we had gone out with better terms or different terms, we would get more proposals. So I just want you to know that what was in there was not, you have to give us $1.37 million. That deal is done. It is gone. I know everybody wants to, think about it, but it's not here because it didn't work. Financially, they could not get the loan. They could not get the money. And so when you're starting over and you're putting now we are in a position of not responding to an unsolicited P3. Now we are able to solicit business. So you start over. And so what we put in the document was the agreement. There was an agreement that included 1.3 from a concessionaire towards the cost of planning, design, construction of the bistro building. So they were looking at all-in costs: planning, design, permitting, construction. The agreement was terminated earlier this year after they failed to meet the financial commitment. However, to keep the project moving forward, the city has invested more than $1 million to complete the design and construct the framework of the bistro building. Here's the key point. The city is seeking a concessionaire who will invest funds toward the overall construction of the structure. It was completely open. There's no requirement that it had to be on day one. There's no requirement it had to be after year 5 or paid off in the first 10 years. We left it open to the market on how to make the financial contribution. So I want you all to know that, because I've heard that come up several times. It wasn't that we wrote this so restrictive that the free market couldn't generate its own ideas and come back to us. I will tell you, we had numerous people pick up this proposal. I spoke personally to 5 different people. The reason, most of them, when we called them afterwards to say, why did you not pick up? Why did you not submit? Was because they were not willing to take the risk to put out $500,000 for a liquor license, knowing whether or not they were going to even be able to generate that kind of revenue. That was the number one response. It wasn't the financial terms. It was, and also This one was pretty across the board, 30-year deal. I think 5 of you said no to that. The original proposal that went out, concessionaire agreement, the initial term, this is what we put out. The initial term of the proposal agreement shall be 10 years with the option to renew for 2 additional 5-year for a total of 10. When you get one response from the market, you're negotiating from a position of weakness. Normally, we'd have 3, 4, and 5. We could look at somebody and say, if you don't accept this deal, we're moving on to number 2. That wasn't available to us. So we have to then negotiate the best we can to get to a point of agreement, a win-win. It's easy to say, oh, well, we wanted $1 million for the docks. Well, if the response is, I'm not doing it, take it out of the deal. That's what I tried to tell you all. That's an immaterial term. Because the solution for them is, why take on the management? Why take on the procurement? Why take on the construction? Why give you an interest-free loan if I don't have to? Just take it out. So then it becomes, how do we salvage activating the waterfront, knowing that that is a key component that the community wants? So there's a lot going on here. I think I've got a good understanding that definitely needs to be money up front, some amount, to reduce what would become long-term debt. The 240, so that would change the 240 monthly payments, and the 30-year term is not acceptable. And I got some other stuff there. But I think across the board, 30-year was said to be too long, and there has to be some upfront money. And then a couple of you did say you'd like to try to target the 1.3 over the 1. But again, I want you to know, we're looking for a financial contribution. I'm not gonna risk losing the deal over, so when we start negotiating all this stuff, it's how much can we get to before we break? Thank you.
I think it's some of the other questions that we need to be addressing as well. Hours of operation, we haven't talked about that. I know it's in the term sheet, so are we okay with that? And some of the things that the city attorney had brought up in the very beginning. And, for me, I guess, I was just kind of writing down some of the things that, I like the 10-10-10 lease agreement. The 1.3, 1,310,194, like Councilmember Long, if they did a 1 million up front and did the 310 over the 10-year period, I would be okay with that. The minimum guarantee is 6250. I would just like to structure the percentages the same that the boathouse has now. I do believe that we should be getting a percentage of the food truck rental. I don't know what that is. If you don't want to carve that out completely out of the agreement, I don't know if it's a 50-50 split or something to that effect. But since there's so much money's on the table, I think we have to do something with that. We just don't give that up. What the city manager says, I don't see us negotiating from a standpoint of weakness. It's our property. It's our facility. And I think we are the ones that dictate to some degree exactly what the minimum is that we're going to accept. I think that's what we need to do. I think some of the other things that we got to make sure that we put in this agreement that I haven't heard us mention, maintenance expectation, who's going to be taking care of the facility, who's going to be cleaning up, those sorts of things need to be listed in here. So to me, if we're trying to get as much money for our taxpayers to reimburse them on the monies that we've spent, we have to add in there a portion of that food truck rental. So to me, that could be a deal breaker for me. So that's kind of where I'm at. Councilmember Steinke.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm in relative agreement with everything that's been said. Again, I'll reiterate, I'd like to see the Kearns Group do this. They're here today. They've heard. I think we give them another chance to come back to the table, knowing where we stand. And I too don't understand why our attorney wasn't involved. I think that's mandatory. I think that our attorney has to be involved. However, whatever. So if that means that their attorney has to be there at the same time, then that needs to be incumbent upon the Kearns Group to have their attorney there, have our attorney there, and let's hammer this thing out. What's fair is fair. I don't believe that comparing it to slip away is congruent. Structurally, yes, but actual amounts of money, no. This is nowhere near the building that's there. It's nowhere near the bar the bar area that's there, the dining areas that are there. It's not that. I don't think if I owned a food truck, I wouldn't pay the same rent to be at Jaycee Park that I would pay to be at Slipaway. So to think that revenue stream from those pads will be the same as Slipaway, I think that's a mistake. I believe that the Kearns Group, I'm sure, has a business pro forma. They've sat down and said, here's what we believe we can expect to come in. Here's what the cost of doing business is going to be. They've got to pay their labor costs. Yes, they've got to invest in a liquor license. They've got to put equipment in there, refrigeration, the remainder of the build out, so on and so forth. So there are costs. If they were not to pay the $1 million or the $1.4 million up front, they're going to be paying money. It won't be to us, but there's investment that's going to be involved in their part. That being said, I still believe they need to put skin in the game to us. And so I like the idea of the $1 million up front, 400 over time, whatever that number is, the appropriate number for the facilities that they will occupy to get that done. So I don't believe we should go out for another RFP. I believe the Kearns Group's heard, and they have the opportunity to come and say, hey, based on what we've heard, this is how we'd be willing to modify, and let's put it together and let's get the place open. That's where I stand on it.
Councilmember Cadid.
Thank you, Mayor. I agree with Councilmember Steinke. And what is Plan B? And that's rhetorical. So the city manager covered a lot of what I was going to say when I pushed my light. But I would like to state that no one, or next to no one, is going to put $500,000 down without a long-term agreement and not being able to sell liquor. Like, that's just silly. That's business. So I was taking notes while the mayor was talking, and 9 p.m. is fine with me. And the reason why is because in June and July, the sun sets at 8:30. So I'm fine with that. And he's going to take a huge cut when it's, pouring down rain in our summer showers. So there's a lot that we don't think about that will be a financial burden to them. So 9 p.m. is fine with me. Food truck revenue, sure. I agree with you guys. Let's get a piece of that as well. Alex should absolutely be involved, which is why I was a little bit ticked off this morning when he said that he doesn't agree with this, because I assumed that you were involved this entire time. So I apologize, but I did assume you were involved the entire time, and you should be. And the maintenance, if I read the agreement correctly, I thought the Kearns Group was covering the maintenance. So that you asked that question, and I think that was negotiated already, or we can keep that in the agreement, and I think that would be a good deal for the city. Thank you.
Councilmember Laster.
Thank you, Mayor. You're absolutely correct, Councilmember Kaduk. We don't have a Plan B. I hope this is a lesson for all of us in the future when we, put together these types of deals to be able to identify significant funding to take away the debt service, because I already anticipate that a lot of residents are going to be concerned about the debt service that was committed is not going to all be taken away. However, with that said, I agree with Councilmember Steinke. The Kearns Group is the perfect group to do this. And like you said, we don't have a Plan B. And Mr. City Manager, I'm a little cranky. Sorry. We're going to have our third fight. You never said anything yesterday in our one-on-one about when I said, why do you think the reason that we had so little RFP, you had mentioned the upfront cost of the 1.4 million. You didn't say anything about the liquor license, which is a total reasonable. I mean, now that you say that, I get that. That's a deterrent. I mean, it would be a deterrent for, a mom and pop who don't have that type of financial stability.
I mentioned both reasons, and I said the principal reason was because of the liquor license.
Well, I apologize because I didn't write that in my notes. So my apologies, but still cranky. And then in terms of the weakness, I agree with the mayor. I don't think it is a weakness. But again, we don't have any plan B. Hours of operation, my only concern, because we saw it with slip away. We're going to have, I would recommend that if it is the Kearns group that gets this and they do the RFP, that you held a meeting with the residents that live around that park, because that'll be the number one complaint aside from sale of alcohol that we will get repeatedly. We get it all the time with slip away. And although you will be within the NORS ordinance, it will still upset those residents. And, they're used to no sound, and now this is coming. So it's going to be contentious. And so I recommend you have, mirror what happened at Seven Islands, where that developer, met regularly with those residents. So I would recommend that. And then, let's see, food truck revenue, absolutely, that should be included in the agreement. And I'm hoping that Councilmember Long with his legalese will be able to, help us, like maybe formulate everything that we want.
City attorney wants to share me in on that salary, I might.
What? What'd you say? Oh, okay. All right. I'm done. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Kilray.
Yeah, I'm just going to kind of roll over some of the summary things I mentioned before. Again, I would like to see the Kearns do this. I think that they're a great operator, and I would love to see them in there because I think they would optimize it. I'm fine with $1 million up front and then trying to structure, maybe $300,000 or $400,000 somewhere out. In addition to that, I think that a piece of the food truck rentals is probably worth looking at in some manner. Just that rental basis, it may not be the 6,000 per month, or 3,000 or 2,000, but it's going to be a significant number, and that can help contribute to some of the workload that we have. I think that we did mention that I think there was a comment in the original term sheet about maintenance of the wet area, and I think that was on the concessionaire to do some of the cleanup and maintenance of that area. So I think that would be maintained. Also, as far as the docks, and that is a secondary step, I'd look at that as a secondary step. And I wouldn't want to close the Kearns out from being able to do that. I think that it would be, a great opportunity for them to help baseload the business. And I didn't miss what Councilmember Long said, that those slips would have to be included under the licensing too. So I think that would be wise to do that, but not necessarily up front. So maybe that would be a future discussion if we couldn't get past some of the initial stuff. I don't want to go out for another RFP. I think that, I think that we're in a strong position here. I would hate like hell to have to go out for another RFP, but I'm just telling you, this is a pretty good deal. And I think it could be, much more a win-win basis, because I think it's mostly win for you right now and less win for us. So I'd like to get it balanced a little bit better. The debt load concerns me. The debt load in absolute terms that we're looking at for this city in the future is a major concern of mine. And I want to look at all ways that we can to be able to reduce that debt structure. And that's going to mean us talking about other partners and other things going forward. And I'd love to see the Kearns be involved in some of those too. So to where it fits. So to the extent that, that we want to keep you as a partner in this one, I certainly want to do that too. So thank you, Mayor. That's about it. I think I covered everything. Oh, and the alcohol piece. I've had restaurants, the money's in the alcohol. I mean, most of your margin's there, and that's where you make your money. And I don't think it'd be a lucrative business to run the bistro without having alcohol. So, thank you.
Councilmember Lehman?
Yeah. I think with the term sheet, that minimum guarantee, I think we also have to include a percentage for the food trucks so that we are recouping money. We are getting revenue with the food trucks. I am not a fan of the contract of a 20-year contract. It should be 10, 10, and 10. I don't think we can go out for another RFP because all that's going to do is impede the April opening, which I think will incite a lot of problems with residents. I don't think, I understand that, I'm not a fan of the alcohol. However, I do understand that in order to make any money, as many concessionaires have said, that if they can't sell alcohol, they're not going to make any money on the deal. And I understand that as long as the wet zone is well policed so that we don't have people running all over the park with, out of control. I think the hours, the 9 p.m. to 8 a.m. closure, I think has to be, because you have people living around that park and we don't want to incite problems. And yes, like with the slip away, I've heard from many residents that the noise, they complain about the noise constantly. We don't need to add to that by having that at Jaycee Park. Thank you.
Yeah, one last thing I wanted to mention too about transfer, assignment, and sublease. In the term sheet, it says that except as set forth herein, concessionaire shall not assign or otherwise transfer all or any portion of the agreement in or the concession area. All of the foregoing and herein after referred to collective as transfers without the prior written consent of the city manager or his or her designee, which consent shall not be unreasonably withheld, conditioned, or delayed. And I know you mentioned this somewhat in the beginning of our conversation today, but I just wanted to make sure that we address this clause for two reasons. Number one, if you're asking the city council to approve this agreement, any changes to this agreement, in my opinion, needs to come back to the city council. That's number one. Number two, where it says shall not unreasonably withheld, conditioned, or delayed, that basically means anything. So we need to take a look at that. I know that I don't believe that terminology is in the boathouse agreement. So, we got to look at that. I just don't want on a whim somebody being able to transfer or reassign the agreement to another organization without the approval of the city and the city council. So I just wanted to mention.
Understood.
All right. Anything else? All right, Mr. City Manager, give you guys some direction. Got any other questions?
No questions. Clear as mud.
All right.
Got to take a break.
All right, I think we'll take a 10-minute break and then we'll start with the next topic. All right, I call the meeting back to order. We'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is A2, which is residential traffic calming, and I'll turn it over to staff.
Thank you, Mayor. This item would be presented by Public Works.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. Bill Corbett, Public Works Department. Here to discuss with you today residential traffic calming. So the objective for today's meeting is to discuss the potential development of a traffic calming policy and, more importantly, the funding of that policy and program. So first of all, what is traffic calming? Traffic calming is the implementation of physical measures on a roadway to prevent what are perceived nuisances on that roadway. And when I say perceived nuisances, we're talking about traffic volumes, excessive speeds, cut-through traffic. We are not talking about safety-related concerns or hazardous conditions. Any hazardous conditions are evaluated by the Public Works Department and addressed as appropriate. Also, we work with the police department to conduct enforcement where we do have safety-related concerns, and this effort would be separate from traffic calming. However, traffic calming will address poor driving habits and perceived nuisances within a neighborhood. Within a localized neighborhood. These concerns are typically local to a residential area. Again, as mentioned, high traffic volumes, cut-through traffic, and high vehicular speeds. So currently, we have hundreds of requests in the queue related to traffic calming, of which 160 alone from this past year. Also, the city's comprehensive plan, the transportation element, currently mandates the implementation of a traffic calming policy by 2028. However, we did want to point out that this is not a statutory or some other type of mandated requirement within the comp plan. This is something that was written into the last amendment and is at the discretion of council. That is something you wish to either pursue or not pursue based on today's discussion and decision. Furthermore, we have other supporting documentation. Our mobility plan, the mobility plan did provide a framework and a funding for a variety of different projects, supports a variety of improvements for all users, multimodal and vehicular. And they are eligible for funding of system-wide benefits. However, many traffic calming benefits will not be system-wide, but some may be. In addition to traffic calming, as being spoken about in the mobility plan, we also have our local road speed reduction, which is currently in progress. We have a study in progress, and you will hear about that at a future meeting. That is mutually exclusive from this effort. It is not required in tandem with traffic calming. However, please note that it may have positive effects on some of the concerns that are reported by residents. So some of the current measures we have in place, of course, are education related to promoting safe roadway operation, whether that be vehicles or pedestrians, bicyclists. The Cape Coral Police Department works to educate residents about driving safely. We also work with them on posting of radar speed trailers and conducting enforcement in areas of concern, whether that's resident-generated concern or something staff maybe identifies as a safety concern. So the 3 E's of traffic safety are education, enforcement, and engineering. So this is a progressive approach, if you will, to building that foundational framework to help promote safety within the right-of-way. Driver behavior is very important. It's almost psychological when you think of how drivers react to competing traffic, level of service, and things that we measure from an engineering perspective. So once they're educated, the enforcement side, of course, helps to confirm that they operate within the confines of the law. We're talking regulatory speed limits, regulatory signage. Finally, the last E is engineering. And when the first 2 E's aren't working, we go to the third, which is redesign. And so we look at what can be implemented within a public right-of-way in order to address traffic safety concerns. Traffic calming, as mentioned before, is the implementation of a physical device for a perceived nuisance. The engineering side here does address both those perceived nuisances as well as legitimate safety concerns that we would address through the course of everyday work. So a little bit of background. City of Cape Coral, over 200,000 residents, very large student population. 80% of our roadway are local and minor roads. So these are the residential roads that we talk about, and 20% are major roads. However, when you look at our traffic volumes and traffic crash incidents, it's likely an inverse relationship there, where you'd see the majority of the traffic volumes and the traffic incidents on our major roads and a minority on the local roads. A little bit of history. This is the fourth time that we have brought this to City Council. We brought it back in 2016, 2017, and 2020. During those three last instances, City Council elected not to include it within the proposed budget, and nor directed us to adopt a formal policy related to traffic calming. We did present this last month at the City Transportation Advisory Commission, and were directed to bring it here to this body for further discussion. So what does the traffic calming policy include? A traffic calming policy has four key pieces. The project initiation, which is where you would have to gain that significant resident input. You have to keep in mind that typically the offenders are your neighbors. And if you were to ask everyone in a neighborhood if they wanted traffic calming devices installed in their roadways, 50% would say yes, and 50% would likely say no. That's why during the project initiation phase, we need to be sure that there is significant resident input and feedback to get an idea of the neighborhood and what their desires are for traffic calming. The next would be the plan development. So that would be the technical side, analyses to determine what the appropriate devices are that would be implemented on a roadway. Of course, determining what the core issues are. Is it traffic volume? Is it speeding? Is it cut through traffic? Ultimately, plan approval, and then moving on to implementation. Of course, all of these are contingent upon the funding mechanism to fund these devices within the roadway. Here's an example showing those four steps in action. This is an example from Titusville. Now, this is not a model we would mirror exactly, but this is just showing you those four key components. And so this workflow just works through how the city of Titusville addresses traffic calming, because they do have an approved policy program and it is fully funded. So some common traffic calming devices. You may have seen these in action, but some of the vertical improvements include speed humps, speed cushions, other options, horizontal as well as vertical. You have raised crosswalks, raised intersections, chicane, which is instituting an artificial curve within a roadway in order to slow down traffic, curb extensions and bulb outs, even road closures. These all come with a variety of prices. However, the toolbox would be it would be composed of all of the devices we found appropriate as based on our traffic calming policy as developed. And then, of course, we would develop the most appropriate treatment as part of that study we would do during the evaluation process. Lots of benefits with these related to cut through traffic, traffic volumes, and speeding. However, there are also some cons. We do recognize that there are noise complaints. It does impact response times potentially from fire and police. And there's also a maintenance component. So currently, as I mentioned before, we do have hundreds of requests in the queue and a backlog of what is estimated to be $4 to $5 million. We just put together an example of what some other communities are doing and what could potentially be a program. Of course, this is just an example. This is just what we could possibly do in a year. 10 projects per year is what was anticipated. But of course, this is after the development of that policy, in which we do recommend bringing on a consultant if it was decided to be funded to develop that policy. So just to give you an idea of some of the projects that are currently funded, that the traffic calming program would compete with funding. These are other improvements we currently have in our currently proposed budget, 26 through 31. Some adopted, the rest proposed. We're looking at improvements to our major arterial roadways. We're looking at capacity improvements, traffic signals, roundabouts, road widenings. Also plenty of safety-related projects related to multimodal users, sidewalks, bicycle pedestrian facilities. These are all projects that you've seen before, and these are the projects that are currently in the queue out to 2031. And we just wanted to give you an idea of some of the projects that we would be evaluating for consideration should you choose to replace those, if you will, with a traffic calming policy. So the next steps, if council chooses to fund a traffic calming policy and program, we would request a budget amendment to bring on a consultant to develop a traffic calming policy for your review and approval. And ultimately, if the direction is to not develop a traffic calming policy, we would work with the planning department to revise the comp plan to remove that mandate from the transportation element. As stated before, this was included as an industry practice. It is not mandated by any state or local agency, and that is ultimately up to City Council. With that being said, we're here to take any questions you might have. Thank you.
Councilmember Kilray.
Yeah, Mr. City Manager, we currently don't have any money in the budget at all for traffic calming. Okay. And
Correct.
If I look at the comparison of projects that we would have to bump, that last, could you put that next to the last slide up?
I can zoom in if
all of those, I think at the time we were thinking we'd like to get them all done like right now. And so it's competitive dollars. And I don't want to be a party pooper on this one, but this is one I'd like to kick the can down the road, I think. I think that elements of what we see here are, from a priority standpoint, real important as compared to the calming policy. And I don't think, what I'm looking at is that if we start down the road of traffic calming and we have, several of us that want to have it in different districts or whatever, they become competitive. And then, we're building that annual maintenance fee. And at this time of uncertainty with dollars, budget dollars, I don't think it's the right time maybe to kick it off at this point. I've had a little bit second thoughts about it since we originally talked. And just knowing our economic condition right now, I'd rather get a little more certainty in the future outlook of dollars coming in from a revenue standpoint before we embarked on it. So at this point, I think could be a good program, but it's not timely right now. So thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Kadouk.
Thank you, Mayor. Did I hear you right? We would have to do a budget amendment to hire a consultant to do a study to implement?
That is correct. We would recommend hiring a consultant to develop the policy framework, including those 4 key components I mentioned previously, and that would require a budget amendment.
Okay, so for that reason, I'm out. However, if there are neighborhoods that want this, couldn't we implement a special assessment on that neighborhood?
The funding mechanism ultimately would be up to the governing body. From a mandatory standpoint, we would need the policy. And as the policy is adopted, then a funding mechanism could be structured if that was.
As a special assessment?
As whatever you choose, yes.
Okay, so we need to be looking to cut costs, not add to our budget. This is a feel-good, not a must-have. So for me, it's a no. Thank you.
Councilmember Lehman.
Yeah. Excuse me, go back to page 9. Under plan development, C, staff to hold public meetings to discuss the recommended traffic calming plan. When were these public meetings, or have they been, or have they ever been planned, or does the whole traffic calming policy have to go in place first before we ask the residents what they want?
So this is exemplary of the process. So what would happen is we would develop a policy and program. And then, so this indicates what would happen after the policy is created, and this is an actual request. So a neighborhood would come in and gather their neighbors, get signatures, come in and request the city to do an evaluation. We would go out and we would do the evaluation. 2C is discussing the findings of those evaluations with the public within that neighborhood. So to date, there has not been any public meetings other than the City Transportation Advisory Commission related to the potential development. However, this slide here shows what the process would be when we have a policy in place, and this is to relay those findings back to the residents and get some feedback from them.
Except for one thing. And Mr. City Manager, you know about this. Over in the Southwest, 25th and 28th Terrace, where that road kind of goes, it's almost like a chicane. And yes, a yellow line has been put down the middle of the road. And guess what? It's accomplished absolutely nothing. These people are still having their mailboxes taken out, still having their front lawns taken out. It's accomplished nothing. I've even gone so far as to try to contact Google because Google GPS is directing people through this neighborhood instead of taking them down Oasis to Gleason to Surfside, hang a right on Surfside to get out to Veterans. And it's accomplished nothing. So I'm sorry, but a traffic calming policy, I've already seen what it doesn't do. Why bother? Thank you.
Councilmember Steinke.
Thank you, Mayor. One of the traffic calming methods that was illustrated to us is the curb extension, bulb out. Is that not what we did on 47th Terrace? And so we didn't need a policy for that, I don't believe. I believe that when we actually did the re-engineering of that street and the streetscape and whatnot, we incorporated those, that we thought that would be good for traffic calming there, since we would have pedestrian traffic and hopefully other forms of non-motorized traffic, bicycles, that type of thing. So without the policy, can we not consciously, knowing that these techniques exist, can we not incorporate them with the overhead that you have up right now that we see? That I don't have that in my presentation here, but no.
Oh, you want that back?
Yeah. Put that up.
I sorry, I thought the.
Yeah, there you go. For instance, we're looking at Cape Coral Parkway, 6 lanes and signal timing.
Mm-hmm.
As we are engaging in making that 6-lane traffic there, can't we consider some of these calming mechanisms, just like we did on 47th Terrace, so that when we're doing these intersection and capacity improvements, say, hey, what type of traffic calming mechanisms might we want to incorporate in these projects without necessarily having to invest the dollars in putting together a formal plan?
Sure. So all excellent points. 3 separate points here. So the first thing we're discussing today is residential traffic calming. So this is in a residential neighborhood with a functional classification of a local road, typically posted at 30 miles per hour. The land use is predominantly residential, not commercial. So what we're discussing here is a policy framework for those residential streets, which you need the policy because you are changing an existing roadway to incorporate these physical constraints which will impact those neighbors, which is why that resident feedback is so important. And so we would be working to implement new devices on those, which is why you need the policy. 47th Terrace was slightly different. Not a residential street, commercial corridor, streetscape project, which obliterated the roadway and reconstructed it to a totally new cross-section. Very wide multi-use paths, narrowed down street, designed to be a walkable corridor, bring people outside. You want to make sure that they have safe places to cross. Traffic is going slow. It's an entertainment district. So the second point is that there's no policy there because that was not a residential neighborhood where you'd need that feedback from the residents. The intent of the design was to be a walkable corridor, and this is why these types of improvements were incorporated into that design. The third piece, the major road projects. Some major roads may be cutting through a downtown area. You'd want to enhance the walkability and the safety pieces. However, you typically don't want to provide traffic calming on our major roads because those are designed to carry traffic. So if you think of roadways like, let's just say Santa Barbara, you would not want traffic calming on Santa Barbara. It's a principal arterial roadway. You want to make sure that the traffic is moving from point A to point B at an acceptable level of service. Less congestion promotes safety. And those are the types of improvements you would not want to see on those major roads. Now, Cape Coral Parkway cutting through downtown, potentially that could be something along the lines of what you're thinking. However, keep in mind that even council previously opined that we need to move traffic through downtown, which is why we're working on the 6-laning and signal timing of Cape Coral Parkway. So when you think of that downtown corridor and the roads like 47th Terrace and the other ones that are just off of that main street, that's where you see the walkability really trying to be enhanced. So that's the three distinctions between those scenarios. So the policy would address residential traffic calming only at this point in time. Related to future designs, absolutely. From a context-sensitive approach, we would make sure that we incorporated whatever type of techniques to make it pedestrian, bicyclist, multimodal friendly.
Okay, thank you. And then the last is on your slide 10. At this point right now, so we don't have this policy. We've not hired this consultant to develop the policy, and we haven't committed to funding for any of that. But at this moment in time, if you're on your slide 10, if that green box, if a resident were to come to us and say, hey, I'd like you to put some type of traffic calming technique on 234 Elm Street, what would we do about that? Right now, not having a policy, not to Councilmember Kaduk's point, if the neighborhood got together and said, yeah, we want to do that and we're willing to have a special assessment for you to put a traffic circle in the middle of our roadway here to calm the traffic down going up and down to reduce speed, what would we do?
Great question. So as mentioned previously, we have hundreds of requests in the queue. And of those requests, we look at every single one. We make sure there's not a legitimate safety concern or traffic hazard. So it is evaluated. We take a look at it. If we find that it is a standard roadway operating the way it should, we work with the Cape Coral Police Department to make sure they conduct enforcement. Like I mentioned before, it's typically the neighbors speeding, cutting through, potentially as others, but the high volumes and the speeding typically are attributed to the neighbors. What we find is that selective enforcement does quell some of the issues. There's also other efforts that we have in place. So as you know, as part of the proposed budget, we have things like new sidewalk projects. So a huge part of traffic calming is the interaction between vehicles and pedestrians. And I think everyone can safely say, I don't want anyone speeding on my street, right? And so that's definitely an effort to separate the pedestrians and the vehicles. We also have, like I mentioned previously, the local road speed study that we're looking at exploring a reduction should City Council choose to elect that option, which could have positive effects on those concerns as well. So as far as what we do now, we address it for safety. We work with the PD to make sure that it is indeed safe and they are conducting enforcement. And then, of course, just other projects that are meeting the same intent of what the ultimate goal of traffic calming would be, which is to enhance safety in a neighborhood. Now, as far as the question related to a special assessment, or if a neighborhood did want something specific, if the council chose to direct us to develop some sort of policy with that type of funding mechanism, that's something that could be done. Of course, we would have to have that policy set and the steps established to make sure that we are indeed being equitable with the neighborhood, making sure that we are getting that feedback from them to determine what the best appropriate course of action is.
Okay. Well, I mean, where I stand on this, I don't see us investing any money in being prepared for taking an action that would require funding that would be denied. And it seems like that is has been what has happened, is that is that it's been brought forward many times in the past. The funding has not been approved. It's been declined. We just had an opportunity with mobility fees to let growth pay for growth and to have dollars, come in that could ease other areas to free up dollars for doing things like this. We didn't take that to the max where we could have. And so unless we're prepared to fund the solutions to problems identified or what citizens bring to us, I don't see why we need a plan to invest money in a consultant to put a plan together to then have solutions brought to us that we don't approve funding for. So that's kind of where I sit with it right now. Thanks.
Councilmember Laster.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm not going to support this at this time either without a funding mechanism and priority reasons. I would recommend we pause on this. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Donnell.
A couple questions. If I saw it correctly, we have not had a formal policy since 2017. Is that right?
We've never had a formal policy.
Okay.
We have brought this to city council in 2017, 2018, and 2020, and it has not been brought forward for funding in the budget each time.
All right. So the way I understand policies, council, is the fact that it's one of those things that certainly we would like to have one for the city because it keeps us, say, in line and gives everyone a sense of transparency of how we go forward. So I can certainly see something I would mention having it because it's, just going to have to consider it and at some point implement it. As you've heard, I'm not going to be in support of it because we would have to get a consultant to help us develop a policy to put there. But what I'm hearing you say is if we have the need, we have internal mechanisms that we can use to address that need outside of having a policy. So in exiting, I was looking at could you put the one up where you had the cost and the traffic lights? So not the
My apologies.
the dollar signs.
There you go.
So if we wanted to move ahead with either of these, because you had mentioned something, I wrote it down. You said you said something, we need a policy. If we wanted to move ahead, I'll look over here. This just say Kismet and 24th. Would we need a policy to get this accomplished? Again, I know this is outside of residential, but this might be considered residential. Let's say this was residential. All of these on here were residential. So we identified these as residential. Will we need anything? Will we need this policy in order to take care of any item on here?
Nothing on this list. So everything on this list are major roadway improvements related to capacity and intersection control. These are what are currently in our proposed budget, as well as adopted for 26. So these projects would be competing for that funding. However, these would not fall under the framework of the policy. These are major roads. We would not implement traffic calming on major roads. The major roads are designed to carry the traffic throughout the city. So what you'd see here is this is a context-based design. So when you look at that roundabout at Kismet and 24th, that is an intersection control type that is applicable for that area, which fits well within the surrounding traffic network. Related to the policy itself, the policy is a process, right? So the policy dictates what that process is with the ultimate installation of a device, which is why you need that policy. But with that policy, you will need funding. Otherwise, the policy is just to continue to collect the requests, evaluate them, and then, of course, there's no way to actually install or do anything in relation to that policy. So these would be separate from the traffic calming policy, and the lack of a traffic calming policy for residential roads would not preclude any improvements on major roads.
I understand everything you said, but I think I miscommunicated what I was asking. This stands alone. I want to talk about a residential. South Van Loon Terrace and 24th 3rd Street, a residential. Are we able to, can council move forward and actually implement any of these devices that we know that have already been documented to be traffic calming if they do have an issue with safety or hazards without having a policy? Will we be able to do that in the residential area without having this policy?
So I'm going to split that in two. So we would always address a safety hazard.
Okay.
So we would look at that from an engineering perspective, and we will always address a safety hazard. However, you do not address a safety hazard by adding speed humps on a roadway.
Got it.
Right? So with that being said, let's just say we had a one-off request. A group of residents came and said, City Council, we beg you for a speed hump, and you voted to put in a speed hump. The Florida Green Book states that we need a policy in order to make sure that it is an equitable improvement to the neighborhood. And so what happens is that group of residents, 10 of them come and lobby you for a speed hump. You approve it. Well, now the next meeting, you have 30 of them saying, we want the speed humps out, right? So that's what the Green Book and the development of a policy is trying to mitigate.
Understood. Thank you. It's for that reason, Council, I will not be in support of it at this time. Thank you.
Councilmember Staiki?
Thank you, Mayor. Maybe we're not seeing the forest for the trees here, and I've always been a fan of not recreating the wheel. On page 10, if you can go there, it says an example of a traffic calming process map. This map must be developed from their policy. So Titusville has a policy. If we go down to page 13, we have examples of traffic calming budgets that were put in place in St. Petersburg, Orlando, and Port St. Lucie, Florida. My guess is that if we have those as examples for us, that St. Petersburg, Orlando, and Port St. Lucie must have traffic calming policies. So that we could address those neighbors, those 10 neighbors that want to put a speed hump in. And according to the Green Book, we need a policy to be able to address their request for that. Why could we not take a look at those 4 policies? Or even more, if there's more examples out there of municipalities that have put these traffic calming policies in place, and choose to pick one. If we want to have a policy in place, rather than necessarily getting a consultant, let's just take a look at the policies that some other municipalities have done, take a look and see if that would suit our need here, and just adopt their policy.
Ultimately, that could be an option if it was to be reviewed and evaluated by both the technical side and the governing body from a policy perspective. But ultimately, without the funding source, we would get through the policy up until the implementation phase, and at which point we would not have any funding to implement those devices as the study yields.
Unless, of course, when that group of 10 citizens comes and says, we want a speed hump in our neighborhood, and they follow the process, and it goes through to the point of Titusville's process, where Public Works takes phase 2 plan to City Council for approval and funding during annual budget process. And to Councilmember Kaduk's point, okay, we're willing to do this, but we'd have to put in a special assessment, or however, whatever. At least it got us to that point where there was a way for citizens to say, hey, I would like this done. We got to follow this roadmap to get it there. And it comes here to either be approved or not approved for funding. At least we'd have a process in place that the citizens could avail themselves of. And rather than us just blanket saying, no, we're not going to pay for anything, and so we don't need a plan, if we just totally reject this idea now, then say, okay, we're not going to worry about traffic calming in our city, have the process in place, and per request, you identify whether you want to include that in the budget or not. And we might not be talking about the hundreds of thousands of dollars that might be represented here, or millions of dollars that are represented here. But instead, it might just be that $18,000 project that could be approved or not approved to be put in the budget.
If I may, Mayor, and good morning, Mayor and members of council, Matt Williams, Public Works Director. A couple of things that I do want to mention. I'll let Bill answer the question, but as far as funding, the one thing we tend to forget about or brush over is ongoing maintenance. So with these types of elements that we introduce into the roadway, there will be an ongoing maintenance amount that comes along with it. So we got that to consider. And then every one of those touch points that you see there under the Titusville example, that's an employee having to carry out some work there. So as far as management of that program within our traffic group, I would expect to, request at least one person to be able to manage the effort behind the traffic calming policy. So there's a couple other things regarding the funding associated with this. I just didn't want to brush over.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Regarding individual requests coming for funding, that is definitely an option. I will note that we do have a backlog of hundreds of requests, so millions worth of improvements, but that is an option if that is what the governing body chooses to elect.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree with Councilmember Steinke. If we can take a look at other organizations and see what type of policy they have and maybe try to utilize their policy, that doesn't cost us anything to do that. And if we have a policy in place, even if this is something that is, that a particular neighborhood or whatever wants to have a policy or have something implemented that they do a special assessment in their community, I guess that could happen. But I think not doing anything, if we have an avenue where we could look at other organizations and see if they have a policy that we could implement, that doesn't cost anything. I'm not in favor of spending $500,000 for a policy that probably somebody else already has that we could probably utilize. But I would support staff looking at other organizations, seeing if there is something that that we may be able to utilize and bring that back for a future discussion. As far as implementing some type of tax dollars, that's something we can do on a case-by-case basis. If there's a large amount of complaints in a particular area, a lot of people, the first thing they want to do is put a speed bump in. But we all know there's a lot more to that than just putting in a speed bump. And we do already have a type of traffic calming policy now. It's called law enforcement. So they can go out and they can enforce that particular roadway if there's problems with speeders. So we do have that available to us as well. But I would be in favor of taking a look at other agencies, other organizations, see what type of policy they have, and then having staff bring that back to us and seeing if we could implement something that way instead of spending tax dollars on a organization to bring something back that may already be there. Councilmember Kilray?
Yeah, I'm on board with that. It's a common sense approach. Doesn't cost us anything up front. And if we do it by assessment it's at a future date, that's great. So thank you.
If I may ask a follow-up question.
Sure.
When we bring back those example policies from other municipalities, would you like it geared and targeted toward those which have a special assessment or just a very high-level overview of what the technical and policy requirements would be? Or did you want to see all of the options related to potentially funding a program as well? Because I'm sure there are municipalities out there that have a variety of funding mechanisms, and I don't want to bring forth anything that is going to bring us in the other direction, if you will.
For me, just something high level, that we can take a look at. The probability of us funding something is probably pretty slim. But if there's an opportunity, if a particular neighborhood or something wants to fund it themselves, and we have a policy in place and say, yeah, we can do it, this is how much it costs. Are you willing to pay for that type of a project? Having a policy in place, I think, doesn't hurt. And it could be on a case-by-case basis that we take a look at these concerns. Maybe it's something that goes through CTAC, and then they make a recommendation back to City Council. I mean, there's a variety of ways. I'm not necessarily looking to fund that because I think we have a lot of other priorities that we need to fund first. But if there's a other avenue in order to fund these type of projects, if we have a policy in place, then maybe that's available to them. Councilmember Kadoop.
Thank you, Mayor. And I completely agree with you. I pushed my light to say high level because I don't know if there's a city that's doing a special assessment. However, if we did have a neighborhood, a group of residents that came together and they were like, we absolutely need this, then that is what we offer them for the funding rather than it coming out of the general fund and us budgeting and doing a millage rate when we have roads that need paved and other priorities. If it's a priority for that neighborhood and they want to fund it, absolutely. Thank you.
Understood. We will work to put together some example policies at a high level related to the technical and policy elements and bring that forth for further discussion.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move on to the next item of discussion, auxiliary power residential structures regarding generators. I think this was brought forward by Councilmember Kilrain. So, Councilmember, I'll give you the floor.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mayor. What happened was we had a electrical company, Mr. Jack Schwartz with NCS Electric came forward, and he had a little bit of a dilemma. He wanted to put a generator in, and our requirements now, it has to be within 4.5 feet with the envelope of the building itself. And we have the opportunity to do it up front. But we're required a wall to go in front of it. And he proposed, it sounded like a common sense solution, and he reviewed it with myself and city manager, wherein he would go to the back of the property. His particular feature was that he was able to go beyond the pull lanai cage and put in a small pad and put the generator back there. The benefit of doing it back there is out of sight, out of mind. He certainly had all the clearances there, but it was beyond what our current zoning allows. So he brought it forward as an option. I reviewed it with city manager, and I think staff has a presentation that goes over the current situation. And I see it as a common sense, good opportunity to be able to accept something and expand the capabilities without a lot of extra cost, as long as it's properly buffered with some kind of landscaping mechanism that's a similar feature to what they use in the rest of the house, as opposed to a wall up front. So, city manager, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
I think that sums it up. The presentation that we have essentially is just a current state. So we can go through that, or, I mean, if you've looked at it.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty straightforward. This just relocates it to the back. And the only parameter I think that we'd want to place on it would be that we would put some type of buffering. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
You had a picture, right, of the.
Yeah, sure.
I think it would be good for us to put up the picture just to kind of show, because this is the current state, but I think that is illustrative of what.
Page 2. You might want to go over the detail one, what the current one describes, Mike.
Yeah.
So it's a pretty crude drawing, but basically you can see the home envelope there. And the basic requirement was to either bring it up front or be within 4.5 feet. His proposal was to go behind the cage, and then go to the back of the property. It just makes good sense to do it that way. It'd be located in more direct pathway to some of the other utilities coming in. And it'd be a lot probably cleaner visual than having it in the front of the house and prevent having to go through the cost of the wall and everything else.
So this is the house. You can see the pool enclosure goes all the way. This is right up to the side setback. So there's essentially no room. They've got a full lanai, a cabana, pool enclosure. And so the current code requires the generator to be within 5 feet of the building itself. And in this case, they were looking to put a small patio, paver patio with the generator in the back. And because of our current code, that would not be allowed.
So I guess the ask is to be able to modify the current code to allow such in the rear of the property.
Anything else?
That's it.
Yeah, my understanding, the way the current regulation is it has to be 4.5 feet from the structure. And the pool cage isn't characterized as a structure of the home. So what you're asking is, sounds like what you're asking is to incorporate the pool deck as part of the structure.
Yeah.
You know, because I started to say enclosure, but some pools don't have enclosures.
Yeah.
Some are open. So I see Amy kind of moving your head back there. So maybe what, do you have a concern with how would we word that in such a way where 4.5 feet from the pool structure? Because if you look at that picture, that's basically what it is. One thing that you do probably have to keep in mind, the 4.5 feet, some pool enclosures are 10 feet from the seawall. So you only have 10 feet.
That's true. Yeah.
So 4.5 feet would actually impede into the PUE. So I would say in the rear of the house that if we're going to change that we have to make sure we mention in there that you can't impede into the PUE area. So maybe you only have the 4 feet to work with in the back, not the 4.5 feet. So I just wanted.
I definitely think we can write it any way that we need to not change the intent of how we classify a pool screen enclosure, but also meet the intent of what you all are looking to do here.
Yeah.
So, and still maintain keeping it out of the easement.
Yep.
So.
Yeah. And I'm fine with that. I think it's easy to do, incorporate the same screening that's required if it's in the front of the house. To me, it's no different if it's in the front or the rear, if they can put it in. And I'm assuming that most of those equipments need to be at flood elevation height requirements. So we'll have to make sure that that's noted in there. That'll be raised. So we have to make sure that the screening is at least covering the generator. So I don't have a problem with it. Councilmember Steinke?
Thank you, Mayor. In my other life, issues like this are dealt with on a regular basis. And a couple things came to mind in here that I actually went to one of our architectural designers, of which we have 4. It's on page 3 of the presentation or the backup material. I guess we've not got no one there to bring this up, but where it's talking about distances. And since this would be a citywide change, and since this equipment needs to be above flood plain on many of our waterfront properties, when you consider the fences and the restriction on the ability to put an opaque fence within 20 feet of the water, where that can only be 3 feet above grade, they'd be having to put a platform in place that was in many cases 5 feet above grade, and then have to enclose it with which and will bring me to another point of what you enclose it with. So I'm a little concerned with this being a citywide implementation, to use just the one example that we have right now on that particular property, how this would work. That if we change the rules for the entire city, we're going to have problems property to property. The equipment manufacturers require an 18-inch space, if you will, between the equipment and an obstruction. And most of them are 24 inches wide. And so if you're going to enclose it in something that matches the home, most of that would be cement block and stucco and paint to match the home. So you got 10 inches for that. You got 18 inches on both sides. And then 24 inches for the unit. You got a total of 70 inches there that already breaks the 5 feet that we have in our rule. And so I think we have to be careful with the dimensions that we're dealing with here. And based on flood elevation for the equipment on the back side of a waterfront property, we are going to obstruct the view from the neighbor's house. With that generator that's sitting up in the air where it needs to be, plus the enclosure that then needs to be around it. The enclosure that's around it, what was mentioned during my meeting with staff was that we kind of want to match where we are with sheds, and the shed being blocked from view, and landscaping was allowed in that case. I don't agree with the landscaping. The landscaping looks great the day it's planted, and then it dies a year later and no one ever replaces it. And whatever it was supposed to be a facade for becomes an eyesore. And so when I think about this allowing the generators to be behind the home that far away from the home, I think we have to be very careful with the dimensions that we have and at what height that equipment needs to be placed. So those are the concerns I have around it. I certainly understand, based on the sketch that was presented to us, how it works for that home. But how it works for 100,000 homes in our city, I'd be concerned with that, and how it would set a precedent for what could be placed, and then what other restrictions that we've, I shouldn't call it a restriction, the accommodations that we've made for the views enabled of our canal system to have a unit like that. We're going to have something in there that, says you can't break this rule. And so, okay, you can do this on the side of the house, right? You can do it as long as you're within 5 feet of the side of the house. But if you got the house built all the way up to the setback, you only got 7.5 feet left. So if you're going to go out 5 feet, you only got 2.5 feet left. We've already busted the utility easement. And so we have it in place right now where, hey, you can't supersede this restriction. Well, the same thing would have to be true is if it's in the back of the house, then you can't supersede this other restriction that says you can't block the view of your neighbor if you're on the water. It can't be within 20 feet of the rear property line. So there's additional components to this, so we got to make sure is in there that we don't put something in place that someone brings to us and say, hey, that's what your rules are. And so here's my generator sitting 5 feet above the ground in the back of my house.
Yeah, when we regulate these through land development code, the effect is they all stack together. So it creates a series of things that our engineers and architects and contractors need to deal with. It's not that any one of these eliminates another code or another requirement. So
we're prepared.
This one is specifically on placement and distance from the building. The floodplain ordinance, the federal code, the building code, any other setbacks, all those other codes in other sections all still apply. All this is doing, if you make a change to this table, and I hear you saying, bringing up another point, which may lead to something else, but the max distance from the building envelope in the rear yard, the discussion here is to allow that to be greater than 5 feet, but you can't be greater than 5 feet and then bust some other code. We wouldn't issue the permit. So all those still apply. It's just this specific one about placement.
And so I think just so it's kind of written rules before the fact, I think we need to have something in there that says that it can be further than 5 feet, although it can't break any other code or whatever. That we don't have a generator superstore selling these to people going, oh yeah, you can put it there in the back of your house. They just passed a rule that says you can put it in the back of your house, and somebody buys the generator, and then we're looking like, that we set them up for failure with a rule that wasn't fully transparent, if you will. And if we are going to make the change, then let's address this 5-foot issue, especially in the side setbacks where more room is needed, and in the front where more room is needed. If in fact those dimensions hold true, let's fix it all. If we're going to go in and do it, let's do it all. Let's not just take one piece of it. And feel free to investigate those dimensions. That 60 inches is enough if in fact we're going to match the exterior of the home that is being placed in front of or beside of. Let's make sure if that needs to get changed to 6 feet, let's do it all at once. Thanks.
Councilmember Donnell?
Yeah, just unintended consequences, you know what I mean? And I guess you've looked at it, globally and saying that this isn't going to negatively impact us and create a domino effect, because you've already looked at that. I think that's what I'm hearing you say. This will not, create a situation of an unintended consequence. And now here we are to the end of what the councilman was saying.
We're approaching this with a scalpel.
Okay.
So we were not looking at changing any setback requirements, PUEs, visibility corridors. This was literally a situation that was brought in that said, hey, we want to add a generator to make our home more resilient during hurricanes. But because our home is pre-existing, we're not building new, and the patio goes from building structure side to structure side, and there's a pool patio. In order to meet this current code, we'd be ripping up the patio to fit it within 5 feet. But that very same property still has 30 feet behind the pool, to the property line, which is well outside of the 10-foot rear yard setback. So there's plenty of room to add a nice paver walkway, or I think they called it a paver patio, to put a generator and shield it, with, in this case, I think it was landscaping. So we were looking at this as a scalpel treatment to homeowners and businesses who are trying to become more resilient, but not saying we're going to wipe out or eliminate any other requirement.
Okay. Thank you very much. That's all, Mayor.
Councilmember Steinke?
I just want to reiterate that I am not in favor of landscaping being
I have you noted
the
for
facade.
that.
And I would encourage my council members to understand and think about landscaping requirements at homes and what they look like a year later.
In this specific instance, where it would be out the generator, if allowed, right now it's not, if it was allowed to be outside the pool cage, detached from the building, I'm guessing you're saying they would have to build some freestanding structure around it?
Yeah, something that can't die.
Understood.
Councilmember Kilrain?
Yeah, points well taken from Councilmember Stanky. Appreciate it. And I think you could probably construct something that way, and, we can bring it back, or however you want to do it. You want to just do it and propose it? And
I'm open to whatever the will of the council is.
Okay.
Things that you may not be thinking about is to put a generator on a patio that may already be at elevation doesn't require a structural engineer and structural permit. You're getting an electrical permit. So doing that, if that is the will of council, just requires another layer of permitting.
Okay.
But that's completely up to you all.
Thank you. Thank you, man.
Councilmember Lehman.
Yeah, I think what we're talking about is a variance for this particular house. I don't think we run into this kind of a situation frequently, so I don't think we have to do an overall code change or anything. I don't agree with Councilmember Stanky that landscaping doesn't cut it. I think that with the variance, there has to be the understanding that, hey, you have to maintain the landscaping, not that it dies in a year, as Councilmember Stanky said. But I think these people should be allowed to do this. They're just trying to preserve their home. And it's not a home that they have built. They already had it. Thank you.
All right. Madam City Clerk, could you put this picture up? Another one of my chicken scratches. I just want to make sure everybody understands. And this is an example on a waterfront lot where that generator actually needs to be. A lot of people might think, hey, I got a patio down next to the seawall. I can put it down there. That's not the case.
Yeah.
So I just want to make sure everybody's. So you got the home here, which says finished floor, whatever the finished floor elevation. You got your pool deck. Typically, you got about a 4-inch drop down coming out of your house for your pool deck. And then that slopes down typically because of the water. But if you put a generator in the back air, that generator has to be at that finished floor height. I just want to make sure everybody understands that. You can't just put it down next to the seawall.
Yeah.
It has to be at the same level as the finished floor. That's where that generator needs to be mounted. So I just wanted to make sure everybody understands that. So kind of keep that in mind, and then you got to put some type of screening around it, like Councilmember Steinke was mentioning. So that's going to be pretty high, so if that generator, those generators are typically, I'm going to guess about 30 to 36 inches in height. So just want everybody
4
to
feet.
keep that in mind. And if you got it over next to 7.5 feet away from the setback requirements on one side of the house or the other, I think that's the concern that Councilmember Steinke has, is it's blocking the view. And as we know, there are some code requirements for 20 feet off of the water. You can't have something a certain height, or you have to have a certain formula in order to see through it if it's fencing. So all that will have to be taken into consideration, when we look at this. Maybe it has to be 25 feet off the property line or something to that effect. That way it's not impeding the view of the neighbor. If anything, it may impede the view of the homeowner, but I just wanted to put that up there so everybody had a good understanding of where that generator had to be placed. But I'm sure staff will come up with something.
I just wanted to address the variance comment from Councilmember Lehman. A traditional variance in this particular case, and having a variance process for this, we have a set of 6 standards that have to be met. They're extremely difficult to be met. It's pretty much an industry standard on those 6 criteria. Moving forward, one of the things we can consider when we're drafting something is potentially taking it the route of some sort of administrative variance with criteria that we have for other type of setback and dimensional type relief. So that could be a route we could go down.
Yeah, I think, didn't you get a second, Councilmember Kilrain, to work on this?
You were.
Yeah, I think I gave you the second.
Yes, sure.
So why don't you continue working with staff and the city attorney's office and you heard all of our concerns.
Sure,
and
I
then-
got it.
And then maybe bring something back in another
Sure thing, I
committee.
will do that. Thank you.
Right. Anybody else have anything on that topic? Okay. Probably the council rules would be shorter than the amendments. So why don't we go ahead and do the council rules? And then maybe we'll go ahead and break for lunch then.
Understood.
So we'll go ahead and move on to item 5 on the agenda, the council rules.
No clapping, Mayor. So, as you all know, we've got council rules. Those council rules are set forth that identify what can and cannot be done. This is a business meeting. We have structured the council rules consistent with federal and state law, case law precedent regarding what is permissible in a limited public forum and what is not permissible in a limited public forum. And that is how we have identified our rules. As you all know, there are several individuals that come here consistently and utter or criticize the fact that during certain portions of the meeting, whether it's predominantly in recognitions and awards or in those that there is clapping when the city manager or city staff are here for either some type of award, something that should be celebrated, and in fact, they are in fact celebrated in that regard. But based on the rules as they're written right now, technically that is not permissible. So I have brought this discussion all to you all at this point in time to see if you want me to modify the rules in order to allow a level of celebration, which may include clapping and things of that nature, in those circumstances where there is in fact a presentation that involves an award or some other recognition. It's a very limited portion within our entire agenda. I could at that point in time create an exception to that for that purpose. There was another one of you that made mention to during your council reports. Sometimes that's also celebrated as well. So, but I don't know if that's necessarily how far you want to go. But it is without doubt and without question that during those matters where we recognize someone from the community who has done something worthy of applaud or worthy of some type of celebration, we do in fact clap. And that is in fact in contradiction to your council rules. So in order to avoid this continued statement made by a small select individuals to you all, my thoughts to you were we can amend the council rules if at least a majority of you are supportive of that. And that way we don't no longer have to endure those commentaries. And so that is what I'm here today for you all to discuss and see if there is in fact support for that.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Donna.
Very well put there, Mr. City Attorney. But certainly, you know, there's no perfect legislation, all right? So no matter what we do, we're going to get hammered for it. But we find ourselves here. I do think that, you know, it's unfortunate, but, you know, you assume some things people would, but whatever. For us, at the beginning for celebratory, I would love to see that modified, put it in, you know, codify it so everybody knows. I never knew we just clapped during, you all never clapped for me during reports. So I love you all here. Matter of fact, you all give me I can't say that. All right. Yeah. So whatever you can do so that, but by no sense, I'm saying it because, you know, I like to say it positively, but we're going to get hammered anyway. You modify, you know, it's going to come, you modify this, but you won't modify for that. But I do think that's important to identify at least the celebrations at the front. I would like to see that put in writing, and you know, whatever else you all we decide, I'm on board. But I think that's important.
Yeah, and again, this is a limited public forum. That doesn't mean that everyone, and that's why we have the rules that we do, and case law is supportive of this. And I read a recent opinion in regards to acknowledging the members by a whole versus individually that was upheld by a federal court. So it's a limited public forum. It is not a free-for-all, and that's why we are legally authorized to impose the rules that we do. But to that effect, you know, this is a business meeting, and in order to address those points of celebration, this would be a way of dealing with that.
Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah, I mean, we had that characterized in the beginning of our meetings, achievements and recognitions. And, you know, it's unfortunately, you got to maybe spell that out, but I think it would be better if it's just, it's in black and white and spelled out, and then we don't have to worry about it. So is everybody in favor of that, or is anybody, Councilmember Kaduke, go ahead.
Thank you. Of course, I'm in favor of that. However, even on the citizens' input, let them clap. They're just clapping for other citizens. I don't see what the big deal is, and it's their time. That's all.
All right.
I think while you're at it, why don't you do one for Congress based on the State of the Union last night? It might be helpful.
I was hoping you would have your gavel at
Says, let's just go down the line and hear what the desire is. Councilmember Donnell, I think we've kind of heard yours, but you can reiterate it and we'll start on your end.
And I need to know, based on what Councilmember Kaduke said, is it for both citizens input and the achievements and awards, or is it?
Yeah, achievements and recognitions.
Yeah.
How it's titled.
Yeah, because I heard two things. I wanted to have, the first one, I wanted to separate them if we're going to do them too. Because I'm understanding we're talking about the front celebrations. I don't want to lump them together. If you all are all right with that. Because Councilmember Kaduke brought up citizens input. Well, I'm fine to vote on it, but I would like to have them separate because I might vote differently.
Okay. Yep.
Are y'all okay with that?
Yeah.
And we're not voting, so this is just
we get a
consensus.
Giving input. So as far as the celebrations, absolutely. Put in writing.
What about the other one?
No.
I don't have any issue with the celebrations, obviously, and I really don't have any issue with the citizens clapping either during citizens input. I agree when in our council rules, when the mayor reads them, in terms of addressing us out, calling us out, the unnecessary, disrespectful behavior, I get that should be gavelled, but just clapping and support, I don't have an issue with that. Thank you, Mayor.
I don't have a problem with clapping during the celebration. And, all right, during citizens input, people talking to each other is very disruptive. And I feel that, yes, we should be addressed as an entire body, not individuals. If people want to talk to us individually, there are emails that can talk to us at other times. I don't have a problem with people clapping if they are in favor of what someone who said during citizens input, as long as it doesn't become a total uproar, I don't think that's a big problem. Thank you.
So you're yes to both. Yes to the achievement and recognitions, and yes for citizens input.
Yes,
Okay.
for clapping and clapping along.
Right.
I've read the rules, so I'd be, as familiar as I could be with them verbatim, because words matter and what they say is what the rules are. It was mentioned when this was brought up that it was also during reports. And that came from me during my one-on-one time with staff, and that's because during reports, oftentimes we recognize the efforts of either a citizens group or a department staff for a function that they were engaged with, and there is recognition done during those reports when those types of acknowledgments are made. So that's why reports came up as one of the sections of the meeting where they should be allowed, if you will. I know that you all haven't voted on reports, but I'm going to vote on reports. I think that recognition and celebration should be allowed during reports when good deeds are acknowledged. The rest of the meeting is a business meeting. Before we get into the actual business of the meeting is when these recognitions happen ahead of time. And so there's rules of decorum for us during the business portion of the meeting, where if I particularly like something that Councilmember Long has said, it would not be proper decorum for me to stand up and hoot and holler and clap because I agree with what Councilmember Long said.
For the record, I would allow that.
Okay.
I'm doing it.
And so when we get the citizens' input, it's part of the business meeting, as far as I'm concerned. I treat it as such. I take notes when the citizens' input is being given. And so if decorum is going to be held, it should be held on both sides, both from the council and from the audience, if you will. So I am in favor of doing it during recognition up front. I'm not in favor of doing it during citizens' input, and I am in favor of doing it during reports.
I guess for me, it's only for the achievement and recognitions, no for citizens' input. Reports, I can't remember when there was some clapping during reports. I just can't remember. I know we, as a council, may recognize staff and thank them for a job well done, or Parks did a great job at 4th of July, but I know we give some accolades, but I can't remember any real instance where we clapped. So for that reason, I'm a no for the reports as well. So.
I'm a yes for the recognitions. I'm a no for citizens' input. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm a yes for it all. It really doesn't bother me one way or another. I think if we just left it alone, the problem would resolve itself. But, we bring attention to it, and then it continues to instigate the issue. So, and I really don't care if they call us out by name either, but I know that's not up for debate. So I'm a yes for both, or all three, apparently, if we're talking about reports.
I'm a yes for all three as well. It's their time. Let them clap. It is what it is. Thank you.
Because the report only came up with Councilmember Stanky, so I'd love to get.
Yeah, as far as reports are concerned, if I voted no for citizens, so no way I can vote yes for us. So because it is business, the same thing should apply for us. So no.
I agree with Councilmember Long. I think the problem will correct itself and just let it go. I don't have an issue with, like you, Mayor, I've never recalled the time in, the years I've been involved in this that we clap during reports. I don't recall that, but if there's a need to do it, I don't object to it, I guess. Thank you, Mayor.
Yes to all three.
Okay.
Thank you. So what did that work out?
I'll have to go back and,
I think it was 4-4 in some of them.
yeah.
For the second.
Yeah, for the second one. So that would be no
The
change.
recognition awards is a
Yep.
no-brainer.
Okay. All righty. All right, it's 12 o'clock. Let's go ahead and take an hour break, and we'll come back at 1 o'clock.